Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Mortgage Minute. My name is Art Alvarez. I'm with Mortgage Works, where we have the answers and they're on the house. And if you've been watching this show on a regular basis, we're going to deviate from our normal agenda, if you will. I want to get into a discussion about something that I'm really very, very focused on in the existing home market. Something I've been talking about a lot in some of our previous programs. And I really want to get into this in sort of a seminar-like fashion and tell you about temporary buy downs and how they can help both buyers in terms of their efforts to buy a home and get a reasonable rate and payment. And then as well, I think they can help sellers when you're in a situation where you're trying to get your home sold and try to make your home as attractive as possible to the widest possible market. So with that, I want to go right into our training session, if you will, our seminar. And I've entitled it All About Temporary Buy Downs. And I do consider this a must-see for any buyers, sellers, and their agents who are dealing with either making an offer on a home, or if you've got an existing listing or about to list a home, how temporary buy downs can be a key factor in your strategies. But so why am I doing this? Well, the big reason for this is that I feel like, well, think of it this way. For some time now, we've been talking about, the media's been talking about, the real estate markets have been locked up. What does that mean? Well, buyers have been on the sidelines waiting for rates to come back down, maybe closer to where they were in 2020 and 21, the 2s and 3s. Sellers or potential sellers, homeowners that is, who have a lot of equity, maybe would like to sell their home, buy a bigger, nicer home, what have you, are sort of locked up because they have a very low 2 or 3% mortgage, and they're fearful of selling because of then having to deal with having to take possibly a new mortgage at maybe double the rate than what they have now. And so in that respect, a temporary buy down can really address both of those concerns, both by the buyer as well as that homeowner who's sort of locked up and not feeling like they're in a position to be able to sell. So with buyers, what we're going to show you here is learn why offering below list price may not be your best financial option. And then for you sellers, we're going to show you how temporary buy downs will or should attract more buyers and may get your home sold faster than simply lowering your asking price if you're in a position where your home maybe has been listed for 30 or 45 days or so and you're contemplating an adjustment in your price. So that's what we're going to do with this seminar. Let's go right into it. We'll go to the next slide. First of all, one of the things that's frustrated me for years in this industry is how the new home market in terms of home sales is a lot different than the existing home sale market. And when it comes to buy downs, one of the things I would want to urge resale agents, real estate agents selling existing homes, understand that new home builders, I think, are your competition. They're selling homes too. Now, yes, they're brand new and nice and shiny and got all the latest features. But at the end of the day, they're selling a home at a price, and they're going to do everything they can to make that home, that purchase, as attractive as possible. Now, maybe they have a leg up because they're building this brand new, nice, shiny home. But at the same time, builders, I believe, understand financing and its role in helping get their homes sold. So I would say to really resale agents, builders are your competition, particularly the production home builders. Don't fight them, join them. And what do I mean by that? Well, for years, decades, builders have been using interest rate buy downs, both temporary and permanent, to sell more homes. I was doing temporary buy downs as well as permanent rate buy downs for buyers of brand new homes in the 1980s in LA County, up in the high desert, the Palmdale, Lancaster area, and other places around there. So even back then, that was understood by home builders to be a key part of their strategy to sell more homes. And of course, in this last year or two, with rates having dramatically gone up as much as they have, it's no surprise that we saw some adjustment in the number of new home sales as a percentage of the total in the market versus existing home sales. And I'm talking about nationally, of course. Over this last year, year and a half, 2 years, we've seen a move where new home sales, which maybe would typically historically be 15-20% of the total sales in the country, had inched up to 25-30%, while existing home sales were languishing a bit. Well, there's a reason for that. New home builders, again, understand financing, and when rates started to rise dramatically, they jumped in quickly with strategies to help the buyer address their biggest concern: high rates. Give them an option to address that concern. Builders understand that. They react to conditions in the market that require doing that, and they get it done, and they get more homes sold because of that. So again, builders understand the critical role of mortgage financing in terms of attracting more buyers. It reminds me back again in those days in LA County when I was up in that higher desert, Palmdale, Lancaster. We had a branch office for the company I was working at, and we did mostly loans for buyers of new homes. And one of my key customers at the time was a developer out of the San Fernando Valley. They were called West Venture Development. And they were building hundreds of homes in what that's called the Antelope Valley. And one of the principal owners of the company, his name was Lou Berkowitz. He had a background with K&B, Kaufman and Broad. He would call me from time to time. I would go to his office in Encino, and we would have a strategy session to talk about what we could do from a financing perspective as their preferred lender to provide attractive loan options to their buyers. In a lot of cases, that would involve either permanently buying down a loan or more often temporarily buying down the loan. And that proved, again, to be a successful strategy to help them. And of course, we did this with other builders, help them get more homes sold. So I think that's a critical part of the understanding of this strategy. New home builders do it really well. I want to see the resale markets focus on this more, do this well. I think then you can compete with those home builders and you might get a few more homes sold. Or if you're a buyer, be able to buy a home and get that home at a much more attractive payment schedule. So with the next slide, what I want to talk about is what exactly is a temporary interest rate buy down? It can sound kind of complicated, but it really isn't. In fact, it's incredibly simple. So I'm going to try to explain that. With a temporary interest rate buy down, you're going to take whatever the mortgage is that's available at current rates, what I call the market rate, which essentially is what's the best rate available for an FHA or a conventional conforming loan. What's the best rate available for a given credit score at 0 points? And so let's consider that would be the note rate. Right now, as of right now today, conventional conforming mortgage rates are right around mid sixes, let's say 6.5. In December, actually, when we were preparing this program, they were actually dipped down to the sixes, or right around 6. Now, FHA, VA, we're still around 5.75. So let's consider that the note rate. What a buy down does is it provides an ability to subsidize that rate that the borrower is going to undertake, subsidize it for 1 to 3 years. So what does that mean? Well, if you subsidize it for 1 year, that means, let's say if we're starting at 6.5 as the note rate for a 30-year loan, then for the first year, the rate would be subsidized to 5.5. If you did this for a 2-year period, the rate would be subsidized the first year by 2%, 1% the second year. Or if we do 3-year subsidy, then it would be 3% the first year, 2% the second, and 1% the third. So the cost to do this, to buy down that note rate for that 1 to 3 year period, is typically paid by the seller, not the buyer. In fact, most lenders won't let the buyer pay for the buy down. In fact, frankly, anyway, it doesn't make financial sense for the buyer to do that because you're just giving, you'd be providing a good amount of your own money up front to subsidize the payment schedule over the next 3 years or 2 years or 1 year. And that's a diseconomic thing to do. Now, sometimes when the seller cost for the buy down is considered as points, but that's not so. It's technically not points. It's an interest rate subsidy. So that's an important subtlety about temporary buy downs. The cost that the seller incurs is not considered part of the points and fee limits that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau installed way back in 2010 for the current conforming loan environment. So again, the seller paid cost of the temporary buy down is not technically considered points. And what the seller is simply doing is they're paying the difference in the payment each year based on what that bought down rate is. So they're going to look at the payment the first year, the payment the second year, the payment the third year, compare it to what that note rate payment will be when the subsidy period is over, and then calculate the difference in the monthly payment each year for the period of the rate buy down. So let me give you some numbers that will show this to you in a little bit more detail. And on this screen, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how the calculation works, or what the buy down options are, I should say. So again, I described it earlier. A 1.0 buy down, the interest rate's bought down just for 1% for 1 year. Those are not that common. Obviously, that's not that much of a benefit to a home buyer, a borrower. 1% is certainly helpful in terms of lowering that payment, but it's not going to have quite the pizzazz as if you did it for a 2 or 3 year period. For example, on a 2-1 buy down, the interest rate is bought down 2% the first year, 1% the second year. And then with a 3-2-1 buy down, interest rate is bought down 3% below the note rate the first year, 2% below the note rate the second year, 1% below the note rate for the third year. So you don't actually get to that note rate until year 4. So you've got a 3-year period of having a below market rate and therefore payment on your mortgage. And again, the cost is simply the difference in monthly payment between the note rate and the bought down rate times 12 for each year, 12 monthly payments, and then you get the total. So you do that first year. If you're doing a 3-2-1, you're going to calculate that times 12. Then for a 2-1, for the second year, 2% below, calculate that, and then 1%. So, and in fact, in that respect, one of the things I'll tell you is when this cost is calculated, here's a rule of thumb to consider. On a 2-1 buy down, on average, the total cost of the 2-1 buy down to the seller would be about 2.25% of the loan amount, plus or minus, depends on where the rates are at. For a 3-2-1, the total cost of the buy down to the seller is going to be about 4.5%. And again, that's 4.5% of the loan amount, not the purchase price. So again, rule of thumb, 2-1 buy down, on average, about a 2.25% cost of the loan amount, not the purchase price. 3-2-1, about 4.5%. So keep that in mind. And now we'll go to an example of the cost calculation for these buy downs. In this case, I'm going to use a 3-2-1. And let's make a couple of assumptions here. With this example, I'm assuming a purchase price of $625,000 with a 20% down payment. So your loan amount's $500,000. And at the time we prepared this earlier, a couple of weeks ago, conforming rates were closer to 6%. So I chose a 6% rate. Being optimistic there, we're a little bit higher now, but I'm sure we'll be coming back to that hopefully soon. So again, $500,000 loan amount, 20% down on a $625,000 house. The principal and interest for that loan is going to be about $3,000 a month. So if we're going to do a 3-2-1 buy down off of that 6% note rate, let's calculate what the cost is going to be. Well, the first year at 3%, the principal and interest is $2,109, not $3,000. The difference, $891. $891 times 12, $10,692, as you see on that slide. Second year, the principal and interest at 4%, $2,389, or $611 a month lower than the note rate. Second year cost, $611 times 12 monthly payments, $73.32. Third year at 5%, the principal and interest is only $26.86, $314 lower than that $3,000 payment at the note rate. That third year benefit, 314 times 12, $3,768. So you take that total cost each year, year 1, year 2, year 3, the total cost for that 3-2-1 buy down, $21,792. That's the cost to the seller. And in fact, when I said on the previous slide, the average cost of a 3-2-1 buy down is about 4.5% of the loan amount, that's true. $21,792 is it's actually about 4 3/8% of $500,000. But that same cost to the seller as it relates to their asking price, it's only about 3.5% of their price that they're asking for. So in that respect, the concession by the seller is less than it looks like. That's a key important point. And why this is important, particularly in terms of the cost of the buy down as it relates to the price of the home, the asking price by the seller, is you have to look at what's the average discount in price across all home sales. Well, I looked this up, in the Desert Housing Report, which we mentioned on last week's show for my market out here, direct market out here in the Coachella Valley near Palm Springs. That same December report showed that the average discount in price for sales in December of 23 versus December of 22 range from about 2 to 5%, depending on the city. No surprise then that if the average discount among all home sales in all these cities out here are between 2 and 5%, that falls right into the same range as the cost of these 2 or 3 year buy downs, 2-1s or 3-2-1 buy downs. So that's an important point to consider. So what we're talking about here is that these buy downs, if a seller is going to entertain offering it to a buyer and pay the cost is very much commensurate to the average price reduction that homes are experiencing before they're sold when you spread that out across all sales in a particular time period. So with that, I want to go ahead and show you a little bit more specifically on this same purchase scenario. And this is really coming from the seller's perspective. And the whole idea, and the reason I'm so kind of focused on buy downs and really enthusiastic about them is time and again, I'll have a buyer's agent actually call me to pre-qualify a buyer because they're going to make an offer on a home. Well, in the last week to 10 days, I've had multiple situations like that. And in every single one, and I think there's like 4 I've been dealing with, I was told that the buyer was contemplating making an offer a little bit below list, in part because the listings being looked at by these prospective buyers had been on the market for a little bit of time now, approaching a month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. And usually the rule of thumb is if you've got a listing on the market for 30 days, you don't have any offers, that's a pretty strong signal. It's time to consider adjusting your price, which is essentially providing a concession to prospective buyers. So in this case, again, using that same example of a listing at $625,000, and let's say it's been on that MLS system for 40 days and they don't have any offers. And the seller's getting anxious, motivated to move. Seller and their listing agent start talking about lowering the price. Well, here's the first option and the very, very common one. It's so simple. Most, sellers and their agents sort of default to this. We're not getting any action. We need to lower the price. So in this example, what I'm showing is, let's say you lower it from $625 to $600. That's a concession by the seller of $25,000. So giving up that amount of value. Now, what does that do to the buyer side for a prospective buyer? Well, now with 20% down, their loan amount's not going to be $500. It's going to be $480. And what that means is the principal and interest is going to drop from $3,000 at $500,000 loan amount to $2,878. That's $122 lower. So that does point out that if the seller, in getting more anxious about selling their home, is willing to offer a concession by lowering their list price by $25,000, there is some benefit to that buyer who otherwise was contemplating and buying it at full list. By nature of the price reduction, they get an opportunity to get a smaller loan amount, which is going to save them some money per month in the mortgage payment. And at a market rate, again, in this example, we're using 6%, it's $122 a month. It's okay. Not so much that you can get real excited about it, but it's something, right? Well, here's the other option. And again, I've run into these scenarios in the last couple of weeks where I've basically stepped in and said, okay, I'll do your pre-qual at the lower, asking price that you want to do, but hey, consider this other option. And here it is. Keep your list price at $625. Don't lower it. Instead, update your listing remarks and let the buying public, let those prospective buyers know that you're willing perhaps to pay the cost of a 3-2-1 buy down for a full price offer. And as we showed earlier, if you do that, then your seller concession is actually not $25,000 from option one's price reduction. It's actually lower concession, $21,792. And again, that money, that $21,792, is taken from the seller proceeds at closing, forwarded to the lender who's funding the loan for the buyer, and those funds are placed into a buy down account. So then every month, when the buyer makes that subsidized payment based on that lower interest rate, 3% in the first year, 4% in the second year, 5% in the third year, because the note rate's at 6% in this example, the lender then pulls money out of this buy down account bucket and adds what's necessary to meet the full note rate payment each month during that first 36-month buy down period. So again, it's really a simple concept, not that difficult. So again, with this 3-2-1 buy down option, the seller is still providing a significant concession, but a little bit less than the price reduction they were contemplating. And they're giving the buyer a much, much more powerful financial benefit because their first year payment isn't $122 a month lower. It's $891 a month lower. Now, as a seller, you got to believe if you're able to offer a pathway to those kinds of numbers and payment the first year, that's going to get a lot of buyers' attention over just lowering the price, and they get $120 improvement in their payment, almost $900 improvement in their payment. That's going to be an attention grabber. The net benefit between the low price option the seller might pursue, lower price option the seller might pursue, and keeping their list price at the full price and offering the buy down, the net benefit to the buyer is still $769 when you take the difference between $891 full price with the 3-2-1 or the $122 lower from lowering the price, which of course helps the buyer by lowering their loan amount. So those are pretty important, pretty powerful numbers. So now let's look at this from the buyer's side. Again, you're a buyer. Maybe you're looking at this property. The seller hasn't lowered their price. They haven't offered a 3-2-1 buy down, but yes, it's been on the market for 40 days. Your agent checked in with the listing agent. Listing agent says, no, we don't have any offers yet. And yeah, my seller's getting anxious and, we're motivated. So send us an offer. We'll consider. So what do buyers tend to do, and their agents, frankly? Well, again, they kind of oftentimes, most of the time, sort of take the simple pathway of, well, let's offer 600. Yeah, it's been on the market 40 days. I've checked with the listing agent. No action, nothing pending. Looks like it's getting a little bit of a stale listing. We're going to offer 600. And of course, you can do that. And as we already illustrated on the previous screen, compared to going with a full price offer at a market rate, it's going to save you $122 a month. Okay, not bad. Nothing that's that exciting. And again, as with the previous slide, if instead you offer full price and you ask for a seller credit to cover the cost of the 3-2-1 buy down, then again, as we explained before, the benefit to the buyer the first year in payment, $891, and of course over the 3-year period, it's substantial. In fact, on this slide, what I'm trying to illustrate is, even though it looks almost like the previous slide for the seller, this one for the buyer, what I'm trying to show is the net benefit to the buyer when you compare just offering them the lower price at 600 versus offering full price with the 3-2-1. The net dollar benefit to that buyer over the first 3 years is $17,400 in lower monthly payment costs versus just taking and making a low priced offer and getting it accepted at 600 and not having the buy down. So $17,000 in cash flow improvement. You're still getting concession dollars from the seller, but the concession dollars you're getting are extremely more powerful in terms of your cash outlay the first 3 years because of how it's being used. You're not using it to reduce the price. You're reducing it. You're getting it, the concession, to subsidize your monthly payments. That greatly improves your cash flow during that first 3 years. So that's really what I'm trying to illustrate here. And again, over the last couple of weeks, I've had multiple occasions getting a call from an agent representing a buyer, wants to be pre-qualified, tells me what their offer price is. It's below current list price. I've now done this again several times in the last couple of weeks where I've said, no, let's try the full price with the buy down. One of them, I'm hearing they're going to open escrow today using exactly this strategy, where they did offer full after they were contemplating offering below full list. I suggested go full with the 3-2-1, and guess what? It looks like they're going to get their offer accepted, and we're going to open escrow with that kind of arrangement. So it can be a very, very powerful tool to help you get homes sold if you're a seller, or to help you get into home buying in a much more affordable way. So with that, I want to go ahead and kind of summarize with the key takeaways of the temporary buy downs and this little seminar I'm presenting to you. For sellers, understand that offering a temporary buy down rather than a price reduction will attract more buyers because of superior monthly payment terms. Now, in this little discussion, I've been talking about sellers and their agents who've got a listing that's active and it's getting aged and they haven't gotten any offers, and they've got to contemplate what kind of concessions to offer to try to get buyers' attention. There's another aspect of how you can use these buy downs. I would argue that if you're a listing agent, you're about to maybe execute a listing agreement with a new seller, consider a buy down as a part of your initial strategy of marketing the home. That's what builders do in high rate environments. You sit down with your seller, you talk about comps, you figure out what do you think is going to be the best price to start off with in your listing. Sometimes it might make sense that once you've done all that, then layer into that, well, let's see, if we do a buy down, either a 2-1 or a 3-2-1, maybe we should incorporate that into our initial listing. And we've already arrived at a price that we think is going to be competitive in the market. Maybe we should adjust that price a little bit higher to essentially absorb the cost of a temporary buy down like this. Because after all, with the buy down, what you're doing is you're listing your home. And if you offer that buy down immediately when the listing is activated, you're sending a strong signal to those prospective buyers. Hey, I'm a seller over here. I want you to buy my house, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to get you a below market rate, maybe down into the 3s if it's a 3-2-1, or down into the 4s if it's a 2-1. That's a powerful message if you're putting that out there right when you first list your home. So I would argue that these buy down strategies should be part of your initial listing, initially activating your listing, and consider adjusting your asking price to at least cover maybe, if not all the cost of the buy down, a portion of it, and give that a try. I suspect you're going to find that more successful than you think it would be. For buyers, as I've gone over, submitting a full price offer with a temporary buy down is going, rather than the low price offer, is going to provide you much, much more superior payment terms and allow you possibly to actually extract less concession out of the seller than just asking for a lower price. It's kind of funny how that works out that way. But in any event, it's something that sort of doesn't come to mind initially, but it actually can work out to where I call it, in this next point, a win-win situation. If you're looking at just whacking off $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 off the price, but then you end up finding out that you can get, as a buyer, much more financial benefit from doing a 2-1 or a 3-2-1. What you end up finding is, as a side benefit to the seller, is the total concession that you're asking for may not be as much as the price reduction that you're otherwise contemplating. So that's why I say this is a really good win-win situation for buyers who have still been hesitant because of high rates. Use your buy down options when you're making that offer to soften the blow of where rates are at. And then for you sellers, if you're having trouble getting your property moved, pull in the buy downs as a strategy to kind of regain attention in the market and get somebody motivated to maybe make an offer at your current list price. And like I said earlier, more importantly, if you're activating a new listing, I think it's a really good idea to consider a buy down option as part of your initial marketing efforts. Now, one thing I do want to point out, point of caution, because sometimes this is misunderstood. When you're doing a temporary buy down, the buyer is not qualified on the buy down rate. So if you're doing a 3-2-1 off of 6%, the buyer's not going to be qualified. They're not going to have their debt ratio calculated off of 3%. It's going to be the note rate. And that's true whether it's a 3-2-1 or a 2-1. So a temporary buy down is a financial tool to lower the monthly payments in the early years of the loan. So it's addressing the buyer's objection to high mortgage rates, but it is not a qualifying tool. So I can't emphasize that enough. All loans where there's a temporary buy down involved are going to be qualified based on a debt ratio from the note rate, not from the buy down rate. So keep that in mind. And lastly, what I want to leave you with here in terms of these buy downs and why I think they're such a great tool and why I think in the existing and the resale home markets, I feel like it's really underutilized. Temporary buy downs essentially provide you a one-sided bet. What they do is they provide you to still get into home ownership, lock in a worst case rate on a 30-year fixed at current market rate, again, right around the mid sixes. But then it gives you the benefit of having a lower monthly payment for anywhere from 2 to 3 years in general. One-oak buy downs, again, are not used that often. So for 2 to 3 years, it gives you that lower monthly payment benefit over current market rate. So what that's really means is it's giving you a 2 to 3 year window to be on the lookout for a refinance opportunity. Now, the markets in general are all optimistic that we should see rates fall in the next couple of years. I think it's going to turn out to be maybe a little slower and take, and therefore a little bit longer than was originally expected. But keep in mind that in terms of the history of mortgage rates, if you throw out the low pandemic years, you throw out the high point in December of 1981, the average mortgage rate in the U.S. over the last 50, 60 years has been right around 5.5. So we are going to get back to those levels. And if we get back down to 5.5, 5.25, 5, there's going to be a lot of refinancing activity going on, particularly true if we get under 5 and maybe get into the high 4s. And there's a lot of folks, including people who know a lot about financial markets, that think that can happen in a relatively short 1 to 3 year period. If that bears out, if that proves to be true, there's no better position to be in than using a 3-2-1 buy down. Get into home ownership today. You've got that one-sided bet. You've locked in a ceiling on your note rate. You've got 3 years to watch for that compelling refi opportunity so you can refinance into a lower note rate. You really, really can't go wrong, because by doing that and getting into home ownership now, when rates do fall, home prices are not going to fall. Home prices are going to go up even more, in my opinion. And so that's why I think it's very important. Get into home ownership now, and these buy downs would be a great tool to use to get you into that position. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude the seminar. I hope you found this to be interesting and helpful information. If you're a buyer contemplating purchasing a home, you or your agent, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to give you some written worksheets on these kinds of buy down scenarios, at least for you to look at and consider before just offering a below list price or submitting a below list price offer. For you sellers, if you got a listing that's languishing a little bit, you're trying to figure out creative ways to get buyers' attention and frankly help them buy your house, then address their biggest concern. That's interest rates. Give them a way to access below market interest rates. These temporary buy downs will do that. So with that, again, I want to thank you for watching and listening, and stay tuned next week when we'll have another edition of Mortgage Minute. I'm Art Alvarez at Mortgage Works, where we have the answers and they're on the house.